In this episode, we're going to make Linux distributions feel less like a confusing list of names and more like families with shared habits, especially when it comes to how software is packaged and managed. Beginners often hear a bunch of distro names, like they are separate worlds, and then they worry that the exam expects them to memorize every difference. The better approach is to understand that distributions are choices about defaults, tooling, and ecosystems, and that package management is one of the biggest ecosystem differences you will see. The exam uses this topic because it wants you to recognize patterns across systems, not because it wants you to become loyal to one distro brand. If you can reason in terms of RPM-based and dpkg-based systems, you can usually interpret what is happening even when the question does not name the distro explicitly. By the end, you should understand what a package is, why different packaging families exist, how to think about dependencies and repositories at a high level, and how the exam expects you to reason about these ideas without turning them into command memorization. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A Linux distribution is essentially a curated bundle that includes the Linux kernel, a collection of user programs, libraries, and a set of default configurations that make the whole system usable. The kernel is shared across distributions in the sense that it is the same major project, but distributions make choices about versions, default services, desktop environments, and how updates are delivered. They also decide which software management tools are used and what the official software sources are. This matters because two systems can both be Linux and still feel different, not because Linux changes, but because the distribution's choices shape the experience. The exam likes to test whether you can separate what is Linux in general from what is a distribution-specific habit. A good student mindset is to focus on concepts that apply across distributions, like the idea of packages, dependencies, and trusted sources, and then learn the major packaging families as a way to translate across environments. When you do that, distro variety becomes less intimidating because you have a stable framework for comparison. A package is a standardized unit of software delivery, usually containing the program files, metadata about the software, and instructions for installation and removal. Think of a package as a shipping container that includes not only the product, but also the paperwork that tells the system how to unpack it and where to put it. The metadata is important because it can include the version, what files belong to the package, what other packages are required, and what conflicts exist. This is where dependency thinking begins, because software rarely stands alone, and a program often requires shared libraries or supporting tools to function. The package system is responsible for tracking these relationships so that the system remains consistent when you install, upgrade, or remove software. On the exam, the focus is usually not on the exact syntax of tools, but on the idea that package management is how Linux systems keep software organized and maintainable. When you understand the package concept, you can reason about why installing from random sources is risky and why dependency errors happen. The two big packaging families you will see in exam contexts are RPM-based and dpkg-based, and the easiest way to understand them is as two different ecosystems with different file formats and management tools. RPM is associated with Red Hat Package Manager, RPM, and dpkg is associated with Debian Package, dpkg, and each ecosystem has its own conventions and supporting tools built around those formats. The exam often expects you to recognize which family you are dealing with because the terminology, file extensions, and tool names differ. More importantly, the workflows differ in subtle ways, like how package databases are managed and how repositories are organized. Instead of treating this as two unrelated sets of trivia, treat it as two languages for the same ideas. Both ecosystems aim to provide consistent software installation, upgrades, verification, and removal, and both rely on trusted sources and dependency resolution. If you keep the conceptual goals in mind, the differences become easier to remember because they are variations on a shared theme rather than separate facts. In RPM-based thinking, you can imagine a system where packages are distributed in a format that includes signatures and metadata used by tools that manage installation and upgrades. The ecosystem includes tools that can install individual packages and tools that can manage repository-driven operations, like searching, updating, and resolving dependencies. The important conceptual point is that RPM-based systems often emphasize a clear package database and the ability to query what is installed, what files belong to what package, and whether packages are verified. For exam questions, a clue that you are in this family is the mention of RPM itself or references to repositories and operations that align with that ecosystem. You do not need to memorize a long list of commands to benefit from this understanding, but you should know that the ecosystem is built around a consistent package format and a set of management tools. The exam might ask you to reason about what happens when dependencies are missing, or how you would verify what package owns a file. And the key is understanding that the package database is the authoritative record of installed software. RPM-based thinking treats software as managed inventory, not as loose files scattered without tracking. In dpkg-based thinking, the central idea is similar, but the package format and supporting toolchain differ. The dpkg system manages installed packages and maintains a database of what is installed and what files belong to those packages. On top of dpkg, the ecosystem commonly uses higher-level tools that interact with repositories to fetch packages and resolve dependencies in a more automated way. The big exam concept is that dpkg-based systems separate the low-level package handling from the higher-level repository and dependency workflow, which means you might see questions that distinguish between installing a local package file and using a repository-based approach. Again, do not treat this as memorizing tool names for their own sake. Treat it as recognizing that there is a layered approach. The package database remains central, and dependencies still matter, but the way you think about the workflow can feel different. In dpkg-based ecosystems, it is common to think in terms of the repository as the primary source of truth for what is available, while dpkg manages what is actually installed. The exam uses these differences to test your ability to interpret a scenario and choose a safe, consistent method. Dependencies are where package management becomes more than convenience, and understanding dependencies at a high level is critical for exam reasoning. A dependency is another package that must be present for a program to run correctly, often because it provides shared libraries or tools the program expects. Without package management, you might install a program and then discover it fails because a needed library is missing, but a package manager can check requirements and pull in dependencies automatically when using repository-based installs. Dependency problems still happen, especially when versions conflict, when repositories are inconsistent, or when you mix sources, but the package system is designed to reduce these issues by maintaining a consistent view of what is installed. The exam often uses dependency scenarios to test whether you understand that installing software is not just copying files. It is maintaining a coherent system state. If a question describes a program failing to start due to a missing library, the correct reasoning often points to dependency resolution rather than unrelated causes. The broader idea is that Linux systems are modular, and packages are the mechanism that keeps modularity manageable. Repositories are the next concept that connects distro family thinking with safe software management. A repository is a curated collection of packages, usually provided by the distribution or by a trusted vendor, and it acts like an app store in the sense that it is a known source of software and updates. The repository model matters because it supports consistent updates and security fixes, and it provides packages built to work with the system's library versions and policies. When you install from official repositories, you are aligning with the distribution's tested ecosystem, which reduces conflicts and improves security. When you install from random sources, you risk pulling in incompatible versions, bypassing security checks, or introducing software that is not maintained properly. The exam often frames this in terms of best practices, like preferring repository-managed packages over manual installations when stability matters. It may also test whether you understand that different distributions have different repository structures, and that mixing repositories without care can cause dependency conflicts. The core reasoning skill is to treat repositories as part of the system's trust and consistency model. Versioning and updates are another area where packaging families matter, because package managers handle upgrades as a controlled process rather than as a simple replacement of files. Packages have versions, and the package manager tracks which version is installed and what updates are available. This matters because updates can include security fixes, bug fixes, and new features, but they can also introduce changes that affect compatibility. The exam often expects you to recognize that updates should come through the package manager's normal workflow so that dependencies are updated in sync and the package database stays accurate. If you bypass that workflow by manually copying files, you can create a system where the package database believes one thing and the file system contains another, which is a recipe for confusion. That kind of mismatch can break upgrades later and can make troubleshooting difficult because the system's inventory is no longer trustworthy. In both RPM-based and dpkg-based worlds, the goal is the same. Keep the system's understanding of installed software aligned with reality. When you see an exam question that involves updates or upgrades, think about alignment, consistency, and minimizing drift. Another concept the exam may test is the idea of package integrity and trust, which is how the system ensures that packages come from expected sources and have not been tampered with. Package ecosystems commonly support cryptographic signing, where packages or repository metadata are signed so the system can verify authenticity. You do not need to perform cryptographic operations to understand the concept. You just need to understand that the package manager is part of the security story. When a package manager installs software, it can verify signatures, check checksums, and ensure the package is what it claims to be. This reduces the risk of installing malicious or altered software, especially when updates are frequent and automated. On the exam, questions may hint at trust and validation, and the correct answer often involves using the distribution's package management system rather than downloading executables from unknown locations. This is also where distro family knowledge helps, because the trust mechanisms and repository patterns are part of the ecosystem's design. Understanding that design helps you answer questions about safest practices even when the exact tool names differ. It is also worth understanding that not all software on Linux is installed the same way, which is why the exam sometimes includes alternatives like compiling from source or using vendor-provided installers. Compiling from source can be valuable in certain contexts, but it often bypasses the package manager's tracking and can create maintenance challenges. Vendor installers might place files in non-standard locations and may not integrate cleanly with the package database, which can complicate updates and removal. The exam usually frames these as trade-offs, and the safest general approach for beginners is to prefer repository-managed packages because they provide consistency, dependency handling, and easier updates. When you see software installed outside the normal package system, it often lives in different parts of the file system hierarchy, and that ties back to the earlier lesson about directories like /opt. The point is not that alternative methods are always wrong, but that they come with management costs and risks that the exam expects you to recognize. The most exam-relevant skill is being able to choose the method that best fits stability and maintainability when given a scenario. Another exam-friendly way to hold all of this in your head is to think in terms of system states and records. The file system contains the actual program files, but the package database contains the record of what should be installed, what owns what, and what dependencies exist. When those two diverge, the system becomes harder to manage, and updates become unpredictable. Both major packaging families rely on this record-keeping model, even if their tool chains differ. This also means that package managers are not just installers. They are librarians and auditors for software. They help you find what is installed, verify integrity, and remove software cleanly without leaving orphan files behind. If you remember the librarian model, many exam questions become easier, because you can reason that the safe answer is usually the one that keeps the librarian's records accurate. That is why repository-based installs, proper upgrades, and clean removals are emphasized. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain distributions as curated ecosystems and packages as the managed units of software delivery that keep those ecosystems consistent. You should also be able to distinguish RPM-based and dpkg-based thinking as two languages for the same core ideas, with different formats and workflows, but shared goals of dependency resolution, trust, and maintainability. The exam will test your ability to interpret clues, like file formats, ecosystem terminology, and scenario constraints, and then choose a safe approach that respects the system's package records and trusted sources. If you focus on concepts like dependencies, repositories, versioning, and integrity, You will be able to answer questions even when the scenario uses unfamiliar names. As you move forward, you will keep seeing these ideas because software installation touches services, security, configuration, and troubleshooting. When you understand package ecosystems as systems of trust and consistency rather than as a list of commands, you gain an exam advantage and a real-world advantage at the same time, because you can reason clearly about what a Linux system is trying to protect when it manages software.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.